This is the Build Your Path podcast, where we explore how people get into their careers in the built environment. Today's guest is Natalie Henshaw. Natalie is the Historic Trades Program Manager at Preservation Maryland and has been in the industry since 2013. Today's episode of the podcast is brought to you by Poole & Kent Corporation, a subsidiary of MCOR Group. Poole & Kent is one of the leading mechanical contractors in the eastern United States. For more, visit poole-kent.com. Welcome on into the Build Your Path podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Pine, and my guest today is
Natalie Henshaw with Preservation Maryland.
So, Natalie, it's our pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So if you just want to give a little bit deeper explanation, who you are and what you do, just give an introduction to our audience.
Right. So I am the Historic Trades Program Manager for Preservation Maryland. I helm what we call the Campaign for Historic Trades. It's a national program to help develop and promote historic trades careers. So working with your hands on historic structures.
That's really interesting. And I'm also curious how you got to where you are now, in your schooling, early life. How did you get to where you are now?
Like a lot of people in preservation, indirectly. Not too many people know at the age of 18 they want to work on old buildings and specifically what they want to do. So I originally went to college. I got my bachelor's and my master's in history in Oklahoma. But I graduated in 2009, so it wasn't a great year to graduate, and
Right.
it was pretty hard to find a job. I kept running into the issue of people said I was qualified, but they found this person that was just a little more qualified. They had some type of specialty training in that field. So I started to brainstorm about different career paths related to history, and I found some jobs related to historic preservation and being a tradesperson in the field. I had absolutely no hands-on skills whatsoever at that point, but I thought it sounded very cool. So I applied to some and I didn't get it, again, because I wasn't qualified. So I looked up ways I could become qualified, and I found Savannah Technical College. So I was living in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and decided to move to Savannah, Georgia to attend this tech school. It was one of the closest schools that I could get that training, if that says how few programs actually exist in the country, that I had to go a 3-state radius to find one. So I graduated from Savannah Technical College and have my associates in historic preservation and restoration. And from there, I worked a lot of different odd jobs. So I worked as an intern at the National Park Service. I worked a lot of under the table jobs, just painting and paint scraping. I worked with some nonprofits and for businesses. One of my big jobs ended up being with HistoriCorps. It's based in Colorado. It's a nonprofit that does restoration work on public lands, and we use volunteers. So I did a lot of different jobs with them over the years. I think I was working with them about 6 years on and off, seasonally and administratively. So I helped run some trades training programs. And then I came back to Savannah and started teaching at Savannah Technical College as well. So I kind of have this weird breadth of different skill sets related to the preservation trades. And that's what got me onboarded at Preservation Maryland, was a lot of my experience on the educational and the training fronts.
Great. It seems like you've moved around a lot, had a lot of different experiences. I'm curious, have you had a mentor either, in your career as an intern, as a college student?
Yes. One of my project supervisors with HistoriCorps, his name is Patrick Kennedy. He's from Kentucky. He's got the accent and he even has the stash. It's great. He had been, I don't even know, working for decades in the field. And the way that those HistoriCorps projects are set up is it's the project supervisor and a crew leader, and we helm a crew of volunteers. And it's usually in U.S. Forest Service land. So you go out and you camp next to the site and you can't use your phone because there's no service. It's a really nice bubble for learning. And it was probably the best experience I had of some one-on-one training and mentorship. there aren't any official apprenticeships in preservation trades, and so there's not a lot of very clear career paths or training avenues. I went to school, but like I said, there's very few schools that teach it, and it doesn't cover a lot of the country, but there's still people in the trades. So a lot of people have to go about it informally, and that's essentially what I did. And I didn't have a really good mentor until I started working with Patrick Kennedy, and it was nice having that bubble of learning. So he helped show me some of the skilled trades, how to manage a job, how to, organize the type of labor and budgets. And beyond that, he helped me find ways to upskill. So helped me get in touch with some workshops. So I started doing a specialty in window restoration. And that was in large part because of him. He pretty much said, if you start doing window restoration, you'll be overloaded with work before you know it. And that was very true. And he helped me a lot also just with business advice. So after working with a lot of different companies, I decided to try it on my own. And it was just invaluable having a person I could touch base with, both for actual practical tasks, like how do I do X with this window, and also business tasks. If I had some trouble with a general contractor, I called up him, and he really helped me figure out how to navigate those type of relationships. It was invaluable.
Yeah, I bet. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, you've had a mentor. Have there anybody in your life that you've had the chance to mentor yourself, or?
I think maybe informally, in the role of the teacher at Savannah Tech, I definitely did some of that, probably without knowing. I learned about some mentorship programs like the International Masonry Institute. They have an official mentorship program and have people go through training. I'm also part of the Window Preservation Alliance, and they have an informal mentorship program. I'm definitely more on the side of needing a mentor with it still. I'm only about 10 years into the trades. But I want to go through some type of formal or mentorship training because it is so invaluable. And I don't, like with the students, I was in that position without necessarily recognizing or realizing it. And I want to make sure that I can play that role that Patrick Kennedy did with me and help other people get started out and make sure I do it well.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
Talk about some of your passion that you have working in preservation.
A lot of it probably comes from the history background. I've always liked history and learning about it and thinking very contextually about where I am in the world and how events fit into the broader context. So I think that definitely is part of it. When you get into the actual preservation side of it, I think a lot of it is how that becomes physical. So that same type of idea, but with a physical structure. If you go into an old cathedral, it's amazing that type of structure resonates throughout the generations, right? Everybody recognizes and knows what it is. Not only does it physically last, but the purpose of the space can last or change to new purposes. And just being in there and knowing what has previously gone on and why it was built, how it's changed, that's pretty exciting. After learning some more about the physical part of it too, the preservation and historic trades part, I have a greater appreciation for the materials. There are a lot of historic materials that you just can't get anymore, like older wood, old growth wood. You just literally cannot get anymore because we cut it all down.
Right.
So, having it in these buildings, I think is just, I think it's undervalued. Just the unavailability of it, and then also the quality of the craftsmanship and the type of technology and techniques they used in the past. We don't use all of them the same way with new technology, and I think that there's a lot of reasons we did some things for the last 4,000 years of human building.
Yeah, I mean, you use the example of a cathedral. I'm always struck by the beauty. Like you walk in, and you're like, this might have been built hundreds of years ago, and it looks like either modern. It's just like so well crafted. So,
yeah.
Talk about why you think this is a rewarding career to get into.
Yes, I think the first thing that really struck me in this is seeing the physical completion of the work. With history, probably the greatest thing I made was my thesis, my master's thesis. And, estimated hours, it was probably about 1,000 hours of writing and research and everything. And the physical manifestation of it was 3 slim books, which was great.
Right.
And I have the digital copies as well. And I am very proud of that. But, all that work only ended up as 3 books that probably nobody will ever see except for me, which, again, is great. But it's very different than spending, a week and seeing yourself build a wall. And at the end of the day, you're like, I built that wall, or I repaired that wall, or now people can use their windows. And there's just such a great sense of completion. I've also realized as I've gotten older that I have ADD. And these type of physical trades are really great for getting out some of those ADD tics and feeling that sense of completion and task progression. And I think more people with ADD should go into some physical trades. I think they'll find some satisfaction out of it.
I've not heard that on the podcast before, so that is.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yes, try it out. Anybody with ADD.
And you mentioned we're working, either informally with young people or students at Savannah Tech. Why should young people enter the industry?
Yeah, that's one of them.
Right.
Definitely, I think there's an undervalue of the physical work for sure. A lot of people talk about going to get white collar jobs, but I have never been so unfulfilled than I have working at a white collar job. And the pay isn't necessarily better. So it also depends on what avenue you go into, but there's plenty of low paying white collar jobs. And it's just very enjoyable being outside, seeing your work happen. And we know through a lot of our work, construction really, really needs people. There's plenty of jobs. I'm actually based in Savannah, Georgia, and we have a window restoration business, and we're already booked out into next year with work. Wow. There's so much work. The benefit too of preservation work and historic trades work is it also can never be mechanized. So, there's all these different ways they're trying to figure out how to eliminate people from construction, partly because of the labor shortage problem. And there's just not good ways to do that with preservation. It's just, you always need that human intervention, that human discretion getting into it. So there's a lot of job security on that front as well.
That's great. And I know there's obviously like a stigma around the trades and all that, not if you don't go to college and all that. What should young people expect when they're first starting out?
I think it depends on where they go for sure. Maybe the biggest lesson I learned over time, when I first started, I got relegated to the really grunt work jobs. A specific example, working at a national park here in Savannah. We were on a crew of preservation people, and our main job was doing masonry restoration. But part of that is really just cleaning. One of the first basic steps of preservation is keeping something clean and maintained. So every morning I was what we called, I was on pigeon duty, which is, I went and cleaned up pigeon poop every morning. It was very unglamorous. I definitely didn't expect that as part of my work. I thought something way fancier and cooler, like working on steeples or, stained glass cathedrals and all those. But no, I was cleaning up poop. And it didn't feel great. But now with some perspective on it, I see that is a very important step. And I won't say everybody in the trades has cleaned up poop, but they've done the equivalent, right? Everybody's dug the ditch. Everybody's cleaned up the dirty job site. Everybody's crawled under the house and done the grunt work. There's always that ground level stuff that you just have to be okay with doing and put in the hours to do. And so now with 10 years under my belt, I have so many hours of the equivalent of cleaning up pigeon poop, but it helped me get up to the higher levels. I think one of the issues with preservation trades is we don't have that clear pathway like I talked about. We don't have formal apprenticeships. The campaign is trying to get those registered. That's one of our big things. I think it would have really helped me at the time seeing, okay, I am cleaning up pigeon poop, but I will also learn these things over this amount of time. So I can expect at the end to be doing this. At the time, I really felt like, am I always going to be doing this? Like, am I always going to be pushed into this position? And I think a lot of people do feel that when they start out. I've been training some people now and people getting into it. And I think there is that kind of attitude of like, I didn't sign up here to dig a ditch.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to do some digging if you want to lay a foundation. So
Yeah.
I think knowing that, but also trying to keep in mind of where it's going and making sure there is a way to go, because it does suck to just be stuck digging a ditch. So people now have the, I guess, the agency to pick and choose a little bit on their employment.
Mm-hmm.
They're not just stuck with whatever. So if you do find yourself in that position, try and get a better job that will make sure that you have good career progression, or a good mentorship so you can start building up the skills.
I think that's a good point to make too, that there is a ladder to be climbed. There are options, definitely some pathways as well. So, and I like to end every podcast by giving the guest a chance to plug something about their company. So if people want to learn more about the historic trades or Preservation Maryland, where can they go?
Great question. For the Campaign for Historic Trades, we have a website, historictrades.org. We want anybody pretty much interested to be able to use this. We want it to be a hub. So people looking to train, people in their current careers who need help or mentorship, professionals who want to help train, partners who want to support the campaign. Right now, especially for young people, we're recruiting for the National Park Service's Traditional Trades Apprenticeship Program, TTAP. And that's where people get that one-on-one experience. It's about 6 months, and you go to different parks across the country. We're also looking to develop state-based regional corps, so you can be on a crew that works on, like state parks. We're specifically talking about making one for Maryland, so they can go around and learn some of those trades as a way to get into this. So that's one area. And then Preservation Maryland, also preservationmaryland.org. We have a lot more going on at the whole organization, supporting preservation and smart growth, and a lot of advocacy work for the state and preservation in general. So we have a lot going on. It's a cool organization.
Oh, awesome. Great to hear. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Wealth of knowledge, and we really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Matthew.
Yep. If you want to learn more about Build Your Path podcast or the built environment overall, go ahead and visit buildyourpath.org. Another big thank you to our guest, Natalie Henshaw from Preservation Maryland. Once again, this episode was brought to you by Poole & Kent Corporation. Build Your Path podcasts are produced by the Maryland Center for Construction, Education, and Innovation. I'm Matt Pine. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.